We've all heard that AI saves time, and it does on specific tasks, but your week doesn't automatically get easier. And for a lot of clinicians, it actually gets harder. Most clinicians don't know what AI actually does to their workload, and that's what makes the difference between using it well and just adding more to your plate. So, in this video, I'm going to show you where AI genuinely helps in clinical work, where it adds work you didn't plan for, and how to use it so your week actually gets easier. I'm a behavior analyst and I look for patterns in behavior all day long. I've also been using AI for years in my clinical work and in running my business. And what I'm seeing right now is a pattern that affects every clinician who's using these tools. Here's what that pattern looks like. There are three things that happen when you integrate AI into clinical work that most people don't anticipate. And once you understand them, you can plan for them instead of being caught off guard. The first is that the time AI saves tends to get absorbed before you can use it for anything meaningful. When documentation gets faster, more cases feel manageable. When reports take less time, more output feels expected. AI saves you effort on a task, but the time it created didn't stay free for long. That time gets filled, sometimes by your organization, sometimes by yourself, and your week ends up just as busy as it was before. The second is that every AI output requires your clinical judgment before you can use it. So you end up asking questions like, is this accurate for this client? Is this appropriate for this setting? Does this meet the requirements of this specific payer? That review process is real work and it takes real time. If you've ever submitted something AI generated and had to go back and fix it, you already know how much time that can take. The correction and the resubmission can end up taking longer than starting from scratch would have. That's not a failure of the tool. That's the oversight cost that nobody budgets for when using AI. The third pattern is more subtle. Before AI, you were generating the content. After AI, you're evaluating it. That's a different kind of cognitive work. And for many clinicians, it's more draining than it seems like it should be because you're making judgment calls on someone else's work rather than building from your own thinking. You assume that AI might know better than you, and you're unsure whether to question it or trust it. What most clinicians don't realize is that the quality of what AI produces depends almost entirely on what you give it to work from. And there's a specific way to approach that, one that produces output that's much closer to what you actually need and cuts revision time significantly. But before we get into that, let me show you where AI is actually worth your time in clinical work. Because when you use it for the right things, it can be a highly valuable tool. The first place AI consistently delivers is in idea generation. If you're stuck on where to start, a new activity for a parent training session, a theme for a group, a different way to explain a concept to a family, AI is useful as a brainstorming partner. Give it the context, your population, your setting, what you're trying to accomplish. Ask for options. You're not going to use everything it generates, but finding one or two useful ideas in a list of 10 is still faster than staring at a blank page. The key is treating it as a starting point rather than a finished product. The same is true for training materials or visual supports. If you're creating staff training, parent handouts, or visual prompts and reminders, AI can build a workable first draft faster than you can. The output won't be perfect and it won't be final, but the structure will be there. And structure is the hardest part to create from nothing. Give it enough context about your format and your audience. Edit what it produces, and you'll save meaningful time on the drafting without sacrificing the clinical quality of the final version. Documentation is where most clinicians start with AI, probably because documentation is one of our biggest burdens, and it's where AI produces the most mixed results. On HIPAA compliant platforms, AI can solve the blank page problem for session notes and progress reports. Starting is genuinely easier, but this is also where that oversight cost we talked about is most apparent. You still need to review everything for accuracy, clinical appropriateness, and compliance with your specific payer or setting. For some clinicians in some settings, the time saved on drafting outweighs the time spent on review. For others, it doesn't. The only way to know is to track your time for a few weeks rather than assuming the tool is saving you time because the drafting phase feels faster. One of the most useful applications in clinical work is also one of the most misused, and that's writing goals and instructions. Most clinicians who try AI for goals ask it to generate goals from scratch or from an assessment result. The output is pretty generic. It doesn't match their format, and it takes longer to edit than it would have taken them to write it themselves. A lot of clinicians have that experience and conclude that it isn't worth the effort. But the issue isn't the tool, it's the prompt. Here is what actually works. Take a goal you've already written, one that reflects your format, your language, your level of specificity. Give it to AI as a sample, then ask it to generate more goals in the same style for a different skill or behavior. Now it's working from your template rather than inventing its own. The output is closer to what you need, the editing is faster, and the final product still reflects your clinical thinking rather than a generic version of what goals are supposed to look like. The same approach works for instructions. Skill acquisition programs, activity guides, staff protocols, parent handouts. Give AI a sample of something you've already written or created and ask it to produce something similar for a different context. It will follow your structure, your reading level, and your tone. You're still reviewing and editing. That oversight cost doesn't just disappear, but you're starting from something a lot more usable rather than something that needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. This is the shift that changes how useful AI feels in clinical work. You're not asking it to know your field. You're giving it your format and asking it to do the repetitive work of applying that format to new content. That's a task AI handles well. Knowing where AI helps is only part of it. The other part is being deliberate about how you actually use it, because the three patterns we talked about don't fix themselves. So here are three things you can do to make sure that doesn't happen. The first is to know your specific platform before you trust it. Generic AI advice doesn't transfer across platforms. Spend time learning what your specific tools are good at before you commit to using them regularly. Different platforms have genuinely different strengths. Some are better for visual content and image generation. Some handle repetitive writing tasks well, things like writing goals or programs in the same structure format. Some are better for brainstorming and open-ended thinking, and a platform that was specifically trained to write session notes might produce mediocre results when you ask it to write a professional email or create a staff training guide. The mistake most clinicians make is assuming that because a tool works well for one category or task, it will work well across the board. It usually doesn't. Get familiar with what each tool does well and where it consistently disappoints so you can identify the best tools for each part of your work. The second is to budget time for oversight into your schedule. This is the piece most clinicians skip, and it's the reason AI ends up adding to the workload instead of reducing it. Oversight isn't optional and it isn't fast. If you don't allocate time for it in advance, it will happen in the margins of your day, during lunch, between sessions, or after hours. Before you use AI for a task this week, decide how much time you're setting aside to review and revise. Put it on your calendar the same way you'd schedule a session. If you don't schedule it, something else is going to claim that time. The third is to decide in advance what you're going to do with the time AI saves you. This is the one that makes the biggest difference in whether your week actually gets easier. When AI saves you an hour on documentation, that hour doesn't automatically stay available. Your work will fill it with another task, another request, another commitment that feels reasonable because you feel like you have the capacity. The only way to prevent that is to decide what the time is for. Maybe you decide to leave earlier on a specific day or work on something that keeps getting put off. Or maybe you can take an actual lunch. What is that like? Whatever it is, decide before the week begins. Because if you don't decide, your week will decide for you and it won't choose what you would have chosen. AI isn't going to transform your week on its own, but when you understand what it actually does to your workload, use it for the tasks it handles well and protect the time it creates before your week fills back up, it can genuinely make clinical work easier. That's the difference between adding another tool to your plate and actually using one. If you want a system for making those decisions before the week starts, one built specifically for clinical work, that's what Master Your Week is designed to do. It helps you figure out what you can realistically take on, plan your week before it happens, and protect the time that matters. The link is in the description. And if this resonated, this video is worth watching next. It goes deeper into why most productivity advice doesn't work for clinicians and what you can do instead. You can click the link now. If this gave you something useful, leave a comment and tell me how you're currently using AI in your work. I read them all. I'm Amelia Delphonse, and it's time to master your week.